Join me as I sit down with Hugh Vail, co-founder of Mustang Medicine, an organization dedicated to helping people heal from emotional wounds and trauma.
Because compassion is the antidote to judgment, right?
Yeah.
So if I've got compassion, then when I see the truth of it all, I'm not going to judge myself. And then I'm not going to be mean to myself. I'm not going to be... And I went through that and I repaired the relationship. And then I was like, I'm actually really brilliant in being able to organize that into like lessons and curriculum. And basically I just categorized my journey and turned it into a really simple, easy way to understand that whole process, and called up a few buddies and was like, let's teach this. And they were like, the hell is this? And I'm like, let's teach it, let's do it. And we've now been on this journey for years. And
a large part of the work Mustang Medicine does centers on participating in modalities such as yoga, breath work, cold plunging, equine therapy, and sauna, and sharing the scientific benefits to provide tools that help participants better regulate their nervous system and integrate the work from their retreat into their routines back home.
What we've done is we've married science with experience, right? So it's not just a bunch of science where you're intellectualizing everything. It's taking the science to be able to describe what the experience is. And in the experiences are the modalities. So, for example, cold plunging. And cold plunging has become really popular. Wim Hof has like really brought that to the Americas and popularized it. But a lot of people are doing it and not really understanding the benefits or what are actually happening in like mitochondrial biogenesis, right? And the modalities that are out there, but a lot of us don't understand why it's so important. And so we're taking these modalities, providing the positive experience, and then supporting it with the science so that you can go, oh, that's why I need to have my morning routine. And that's why.
Join me in this conversation with Hugh as we explore topics such as vulnerability, spirituality, authenticity, and emotional healing through Hugh's personal stories and discussion of the work Mustang Medicine does. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Before we get started, if you could hit the like, subscribe, or follow button on whichever platform you're consuming today's show.
Who is Hugh Vail?
Oh, shit.
Starting off with the identity question.
Yeah. Who is Hugh Vail? I mean, I went to, I asked that question on ayahuasca in 2018. And the shaman had, she didn't want any man-made light, any artificial light. She only wanted natural light from like fire. And there was a little fire going on. And I had asked myself kind of in a prayer, like, who am I? That's what the Stoics and the Greeks were, know thyself. And, I know where I'm born. I know my name. I'm a Pisces, right? They're like, you got all the things. And I think the most profound thing that I ever learned and how I'd probably answer that is what I got on that medicine journey was the flame said to me, answered the question and said, you are the light of the world. And it just felt so true. And I was like, I'm the light of the world. It was not something I'd ever thought about before. And so I said, I thought Jesus was the light of the world. The flame spoke back to me. It said, Jesus is the light of the world. I was like, so if Jesus is the light of the world and I'm the light of the world, then like, am I Jesus? And the fire flame just laughed, like giggled, like, oh, little Hugh. Like, and said, no, Jesus is Jesus and you're you. And I was like, well, what more could you tell me about this? And first I had this realization. I was like, oh, Moses and the burning bush makes a lot more sense now. Like I see maybe what was going on there. And then the flame said, everyone is the light of the world. And it quoted this scripture to me when Jesus had said, I'm the light of the world. Just before that, Jesus had also said, you are the light of the world. And he was talking to his audience. And so I'm not really sure what that means, but I do think if you get into like Neil deGrasse Tyson and the astrophysicists, so we're made of the same thing as the cosmos. And really, at the end of the day, everything is made of light. And I guess that was the best answer that a fire could tell me. And there's probably something more profound than what I've yet to integrate with that. But it seems like that's maybe the full essence of everything that, light gives energy. So things that I do for work, right? I gentle wild horses and run retreats and help people repair their ruptured relationships with themselves, which I don't think anybody's had a more ruptured relationship with themselves than me. At least that's how it feels. And there's lots of things that I do, but I don't know if that's who I am. And, in our rewilding retreat, we do the summit statement. It's really trying to think about like this metaphorical mountain that we're all trying to climb. And it's like, and I'm going to get to the summit and I'm going to plant my flag. And when I plant my flag, it's like, how will I know that that wasn't a false summit? That was the actual summit that I got to. And who will I be when I get there? So as I've been through that exercise so many times, and this, I think it was yesterday or the day before, we went through that exercise with everyone in our retreat. And there's questions like, what makes me happy and what gives me pleasure and what motivates me? And, there's a series of questions that you got to introspectively kind of dig deeper and peel the onion on. And I've reiterated over the years that summit statement. And this time it was a little bit different. As I thought about it, I was like, I asked myself a question that's not on the list. And we were inspired to create that list by Franklin Covey, that consulting company. They do a similar exercise. But I started asking myself, when I get to the summit, what relationship with me do I want to have? What relationship with my emotions do I want to have? Because for so long I've been thinking about, well, I have these parts of me that I don't like, and I got these emotions like we all have, like fear and anger and sadness. And I think for a long time I've been thinking, I want to be this person at the top of the mountain that doesn't have those things, and he's overcome those things. And I meet some of the most incredible people around the world that have done the most incredible things, and they still have fear, and they still have anger, and they still have, it's like these emotions don't go away. They're our teachers. So I started thinking like, well, what kind of relationship when I'm up at the summit? Well, what relationship do I want to have with my emotions? And what relationship do I want to have with those parts that I judge about myself? And I started realizing, like, when I get to the summit, like, who am I going to be? I want to be the person that doesn't judge those emotions, that can learn from them, that doesn't judge my past, that has learned from my past, that can accept that. And then I wrote down a new summit statement, and I just wrote, I am everything. And I started thinking about Moses in that burning bush. And when that burning bush was talking to Moses and answering his question, he says it was God that was talking to him in the burning bush. And he says, who are you? And the bush says, I am that I am. And I started thinking, I am all of it. And if I'm all of it, like if I'm everything, well, then I also have to be nothing, right? If I have so much pleasure in my life, I also will have so much pain in my life. And if I've done like the Stoics have done, and I've dedicated my life to trying to be as virtuous as I possibly can, well, then I probably have also been as vicious or vicious, right? And it's just like, who am I? I think I'm everything, and I think I'm nothing at the same time. And if you simplified that, the best way to say it is I am that I am. And I'm still trying to figure that out and integrate that. But I don't know. That's probably how I'd answer that question.
Yeah. It's a pretty deep one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of like just diving right in.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned a lot of things I definitely want to, discuss a little bit further, but, starting kind of from the beginning, you mentioned the ayahuasca experience where the candle spoke to you and shared with you that you are the light, right? And, an ayahuasca experience, for those who might not know, would you mind explaining kind of what goes on at ayahuasca experience and what ayahuasca is?
Yeah, ayahuasca is a vine that's grown in the Amazon jungle. It's a really popular medicine that's used in their tribes and culturally for them. There's an umbrella, like a category of certain type of medicine, and like peyote here and the deserts of America, and there's ibogaine in Africa, and there's ayahuasca in South America, and you got psilocybin and all these medicines that are helping in this therapeutic setting, and all the research is coming out that they've categorized that as an entheogen. And entheogen it's broken down into 3 words, right, to create that one word. And en means within, and theo means God. That's where we get the word theology. And gen means return. So within God, I return. And scientists now, come to understand these psychedelics. They have one common molecule inside of it, or like a compound in there, and it's dimethyltryptamine, or DMT. And Joe Rogan's talked about this with some of his guests and everything. It's spread that message of understanding dimethyltryptamine. And so with ayahuasca, and you get into a ceremonial setting, it's very symbolic, and it's a way to be able to activate the dimethyltryptamine, which scientists and researchers also refer to as the God molecule. And so it's a way to be able to get into a sacred setting and a set, and when the shamans understand the dosage properly, and they understand their clients really well, and they play beautiful music, and you just tap in through the God molecule to understand. I think similar to what Jesus said, Buddha said, like all the enlightened ones tend to say these similar messages across cultures, which is that everyone's always asking, where's the kingdom of God at? All the enlightened ones seem to answer it the same way, as the kingdom of God is within you. And so I think ayahuasca is one of these great ceremonies, when done with the proper shamans, to be able to help experience that answer instead of just intellectualize it.
Yeah.
Really have these experiences that there's this kingdom of God within me. And yeah, that's how I experienced what that ceremony was. It's very enlightening, clearly. Like, I'm the light of the world. I'm like, I don't know. I guess my flashlight's running out of battery. Like,
yeah. It's that's super profound. Obviously, it's a very intense experience. Yes. What prompted you, or what was going on in your life where you felt called to go partake in that experience?
So I actually got a buddy. His name's Conrad. He's a quantum physicist. Smartest guy I've ever met. Most spiritual guy I ever met. One day I was out running a big load of hay. I went and picked up some hay from the hay farmer, and I got my big flatbed truck, and I'm bringing this all back. And I was thinking about some things that he had said earlier that week. And the road was really quiet. I didn't quite realize this at the time, but looking back on it, it was a meditative experience as I was driving. The freeway was pretty calm, and I'd really just kind of settled into the rhythm and the sound of the tires. And it just was like the monkey mind and the chatter had just kind of drifted away. And I had this thought. I was like, how could I be more like Conrad? And when the mind gets quiet enough, there's a wisdom inside the body that can be heard, right? It's It's a very quiet voice, but it speaks profound truths. And the only way I could describe it is I heard a feeling. So I didn't really feel a feeling. And I also didn't hear an audible sound. It was like it mixed together. And I heard this feeling, and it said, do a plant sacrament. I knew the word plant, and I knew the word sacrament. I never heard those put together. I was like, what the hell's that? And I happened to have breakfast the next day with Conrad. And he was giving a presentation to a group of really cool people. And somebody had asked him at this breakfast presentation that he was doing, somebody had asked him, how are you so smart? Like, how do you piece of, I mean, you just talk to him and he simplifies the most complex things. I mean, he just puts it in this way. You're just like, dude, I thought I was smart. And then you just are like next level intelligence. And so this person had picked up on that, and they had asked him, how did you get this way? Now, I'd known Conrad for a couple of years, and he said, well, a few years ago, I did a plant sacrament. And I about dropped my muffin. And I was like, what the heck? Known him for years. He's never said those two words together. And I had no idea what he's talking about. And, and I just had that profound experience. It was very rare to me. It was such a bizarre story to even tell. I can't even believe it happened. But to think that the day before, hauling hay on a freeway, and all of a sudden it was like, do a plant sacrament. And then I'm in breakfast with him, and he's like answering some random person's question. He's like, yeah, I did a plant sacrament. And he was like, that's not even an answer. I think that even makes sense to anyone that's in this room. And so it just felt so unique to me. And shit, you know, like 2 days later, a buddy of mine called me up unexpectedly, and he says, I'm playing live music, like with my flutes and my drums and everything, for an ayahuasca ceremony, and it's totally sold out. And the shaman just called me up and said, hey, we had a person drop out last minute. And, but I just want to let you know. And so he calls me up, and this was like 2 days after that breakfast presentation. And he's like, you should do ayahuasca. I'd never heard of it before. Didn't know anything about it. But something in my soul was like, yeah, that's a good thing for you right now at this season of your life. So I said, yeah, I think I'm in. I don't know what I'm committing to in any way, shape, or form, but like 6-7 weeks later, I was sitting in an ayahuasca ceremony. And for me, I'd never drank any tea, coffee, alcohol. I was in my late 30s. I think I was 37 or 38 years old. Never just lived a very clean life. So now I'm sitting in this ayahuasca ceremony. I didn't do any research with it. I thought, well, I'm just going to go. I would just stay open, you know. And so there I am, and shaman calls me up. She called everyone up one by one. She allowed us to pray over this little tiny cup of ayahuasca, and she hands it out to me, and she's like, these are for your intentions, and you can say a prayer over it. So I held it in my hand and had my intention and my prayer. Actually, my thing is an opening question to what you had asked, because I wanted to know who I was.
Yeah.
And I was like, who am I? I want to know myself, like really know myself. And I go to hand it back to the shaman, and she's like, you can just drink it. It tastes so terrible. It's so bitter.
Pretty intense, man.
Yeah.
Ayahuasca, psychedelics, you mentioned the DMT component, is getting a lot more notoriety now. I think it's becoming, while it's not necessarily, I would say, mainstream, it's certainly getting way more attention. I think people are more open to considering psychedelic experience, whether it be ayahuasca or something else. That I don't know if it's just to go deeper or find more purpose and meaning in their life, but what advice would you give to someone who is maybe considering going through an ayahuasca experience? You had referenced making sure the right dosage or the right shaman or the right setting, intention. Can you talk through a little bit and provide some advice for maybe someone who's considering that experience for themselves?
Yeah, nothing outside of us will actually heal us. And I thought it would. And I had all these profound experiences. I say experience because it wasn't in the mind, it was in the body. Right? I was experiencing the things my mind could do. I was I think that's where, when, religions talk about getting converted, I think the conversion process is when what is in the mind actually gets experienced in the heart. And when I came out of the medicine, for weeks, I felt amazing. I felt great. It helps produce serotonin and oxytocin and all these amazing things that help the body, neurochemicals that help the body feel great. Ayahuasca is really, really healthy for the gut, actually. So it balances out the pH levels, and where most of like serotonin and oxytocin and dopamine are all produced largely in the gut. And so it's great, for the neurotransmitters and all of that. But life continued to life, and environment overcomes intention. And so my daily life had not changed while yet I had these profound experiences, and environment overcomes intention. And so I kind of fell back into my life, and all my same shit came in, and kind of like, they're not experiences that I could ever forget, but how do I now live these experiences in my daily life? And the research and the data is really, really clear. In fact, I think one of the best books written on this is by Dr. Bruce Perry. Mm-hmm. He co-authored a book with Oprah. It's called What Happened to You? And essentially what he's trying to say is we need to be more compassionate. And instead of saying, what's wrong with me? The better question is to compassionately inquire, what happened to me? And in his book and in his research, over and over and over, he says the evidence is unequivocal that where healing is most effective and takes place is in a secure, safe community. And that's what I would say is, like, you can go there and you can have the inner experiences, but where healing actually takes place, where change can really get integrated, is in community. And so I would focus in on community and who is my community and who is my environment, more than what medicine, what ceremony, or what sacrament, I could go take. Because, and that's not to say to not go do it, but it is to say that there are no silver bullets, there are no magic pills, there are no magic cups of ayahuasca or peyote or anything like that. It provides contrast. So the things that I knew and I thought I really knew, it came to find out there was a whole new way of understanding it, a whole way of knowing it, like in the body, in the heart, and in the mind. But that's a pretty lonely experience when all of a sudden you find out in your community you're the only one that's done it, and you're the only one, and now you're trying to sit around a campfire talking to your buddies, and they're just like, the hell are you talking about? And that can actually end up feeling really, really lonely. And so what I would say is to find a community that you feel seen, you feel heard, you feel understood in, and have that as the core tenet for the healing process, and then use the medicine, or at least just know that, like, you could actually have a pretty lonely experience afterwards, and it's not going to fix you. It's not going to heal you. And it's just going to give you some profound insights that you got to figure out how to integrate into your life. And, we become our communities. That's just the nature of the nervous system and being human. And so I think community is such an important aspect of medicine. Having that there.
What's the saying? It's you're the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. I think that's super true and accurate. Definitely hits on what you're talking about. I think, integration being super important to the experience itself. You mentioned that you didn't quite have the best integration experience coming out of that you kind of lacked the community and infrastructure, some of the things that you mentioned there. So talk me through, like, how did we get from that point, that experience, having the profound inner experience, going back and kind of falling back into some old habits, to now, fast forward to the work you're doing now with retreats, wild horse training. And so how did you develop those inner skills or build that community to get you to where you are now?
Yeah, no, kind of in a fucked up way. My ego came in afterwards because I'd had all this profound experience. But I mean, I told my wife at the time, I told her, like, I'm going to go do some ayahuasca. And she was like, okay, cool. She didn't know anything more about it than I knew. Yeah. And so when I came back, like having had this profound experience, like, I think the truth is, looking back on that, is it wasn't that I felt like I was better than others, but in a way, my ego was definitely very alive. And yeah, it was just a way that I guess I think I knew more. I didn't think I was ever better than anyone else, but it was, my ego was involved of like, but I've had these experiences, so let me guide you and let me help you. And that's a super douchey person to be. I went through that season. Probably still have part of it that still shows up, but you know, that journey, you know, I ended up going through hell after that. In my personal life fell apart. I don't think it had anything to do with ayahuasca, but I ended up, long story short, my first wife, we had 2 kids together and had a very, very high conflict marriage. We had a high conflict divorce. Co-parenting was a nightmare. We both had a part to play in that, I think an equal part to it. And so, you know, just to speak to my role in it, I think I was very, very difficult to work with. I can look back, I was a terrible co-parent myself. And anyways, we met with some child psychologist, and the child psychologist was like, you know, what do you want with your kids? And I was like, I want the best relationship. I want the best thing for them. I want to go to their soccer games and their cheerleading practices and all those things. And because of the nature of the high conflict, and we just didn't, you know, mom and I didn't like each other and all that stuff. It's really hard to get there. And then if I would find the schedule and I'd show up, and like so much drama, and it's like, and then the kids are embarrassed, and then the kid, you know, and then stories are told about each parent. And you know, I grew up with parents that didn't like each other and talk shit on each other. And I remember listening to my dad talk about my mom, and I would buy into his version of his story, and then it would disconnect me from my mom, and then I'd listen to hers and then about him, and it'd disconnect me from him. And I remember the wrestle I would get into was, man, I just don't want to be like her or her side of the family, or like, oh, I don't want to be like him or his side of the family. And the thing I would wrestle with at night, and I don't think anybody ever knew about this. I don't even know if I've ever talked about this before, but I just knew the math was like, I'm half her and I'm half him. And so it's very easy to not like myself. And it was very easy to judge myself. And so here I am talking to these child psychologists, and they said, probably the best thing you could do for your kids is just let them go live with mom, pull them out of the fight, get them off the battlefield. Like they're taking friendly fire. Mm-hmm. And the arithmetic on it was really obvious to me. And so I ended up sending an offer over to her, and I was like, why don't you and your husband just take the kids? And my daughter was 12, my son was 9. So I was doing the math. I was like, okay, then they'll be 18, and then they'll be moving into adulthood. And then we'd had a great relationship, like with my 2 kids. And I thought, at least I don't damage it in that meantime, like for my daughter for those 6 years, and, you know, for my son for those next 9 years. So I just committed that I wouldn't see her for 6 years, and I wouldn't see him for, 8-9 years either. And I mean, I had no foresight to how bad that would fuck me up. So here I've done all this ayahuasca and everything, and now my everything that I'd hold dear had just given up. And then I didn't know what to look for. I didn't know what purpose to have. Everything that had meaning no longer had meaning. I didn't realize how grounded I was in all the things I was doing for work. And I was working for an organization that rescued children from child sex trafficking. We're traveling all the world and doing amazing things. And a big blockbuster movie got made about it. And it felt very meaningful and very purposeful. And then when my kids weren't there, it was just like, nothing mattered. Nothing mattered at all. And I mean, if the pain of that just destroyed and shattered my ego. And I was very attached to my ego. It was my identity. And it just felt like everything in my whole existence just disintegrated into dust, and the wind could just take me anywhere. And there was no point of living. And, I actually had a moment where I took my horses into Yellowstone, and I had planned to take my own life. I had so much shame about that choice. And the last level of shame's embodiment is suicide. So when shame has now fully been embodied inside of me, shame always wants to isolate, right? So we isolate from our community, and we isolate from everyone. And when shame then comes in, because I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I'm not enough. The last level of that embodiment is I just have to now isolate from myself, and we call it suicide. And, obviously I guess shame didn't embody me. There was a little bit left that it just couldn't get a hold of. And that took me on the journey of understanding what shame is. And Brene Brown talked about the antidote to shame is empathy. And so I started realizing I have no idea what my emotions are. I have no idea what my feelings are. I have no idea how my mind works.
Yeah.
And I think it's all being ran by my ego. So I started going to retreats myself. I started started going to more therapists and seeing psychologists and traumatologists. And I just started piecing it all together. And what I ended up realizing is what I was trying to do is find myself. And so maybe in a weird kind of unexpected way, that intention of that medicine of who am I? I want to know myself. Because it was probably 12 months after, maybe 18 months after that ayahuasca experience, everything I thought I knew about myself was gone. And every purpose and meaning that I had was shattered. And I just slowly started to try to find something that wasn't like I was consciously aware of answering that question, or even asking that question more, but that's what ended up happening. I ended up doing more plant sacrament ceremonies, with psilocybin and DMT. And I was always doing it with this intention of who am I? How do I put myself together? And yeah, it looking back on it, just shattered everything. And it's really common that you have to have a breakdown before you can have the breakthrough. So everything broke down. And then I started really seeing what the true essence was. And what I realized is I didn't have compassion for myself. And Gabor Mate is one of my most favorite authors, mentors, and in his compassionate inquiry certification program. And he has a saying that comes from A.H. Almas. It says the truth will, he quotes Jesus in this compassionate inquiry. He says, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. And then Gabor asks, he says, so what does the truth do? It actually does nothing for you. The truth is just the truth, and it's sitting there. It's all around you right now. So how come you're not free? And he goes back to that verse, and he says, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So by knowing the truth, then you become liberated, because then you can go on the journey of trying to integrate it and embody it and live it. And A.H. Alma said that the truth couldn't come out until compassion was present, because often the truth is so painful.
Yeah.
So I had to look at all these parts of me of like where I was an asshole and where I was so ruptured with myself. And all my external relationships are just a mirror of my internal relationship with myself. So the more fragmented and shattered and shame-based and broken that I think I am, I'm going to end up creating, because I am that I am. So I end up creating all these fragmented, broken, and that was very contradictory to what I was trying to create, and very contradictory. So I had to look in the mirror of that. And yeah, I learned how to own my wholeness, while at the same time having this diametrically opposed truth that I was quite fragmented and quite ruptured within myself, and allowing those two to coexist. It was compassion that allowed me to be brave enough to look at the truth of all of that. And because compassion is the antidote to judgment, right?
Yeah.
So if I've got compassion, then when I see the truth of it all, I'm not going to judge myself. And then I'm not going to be mean to myself. I'm not going to be... And I went through that and I repaired the relationship. And then I was like, I'm actually really brilliant in being able to organize that into like lessons and curriculum. And basically I just categorized my journey and turned it into a really simple, easy way to understand that whole process, and called up a few buddies and was like, let's teach this. And they were like, the hell is this? And I'm like, let's teach it. Let's do it. And we've now been on this journey for years. And
how long did that process take you? So you mentioned from the point you were shattered in Yellowstone,
yeah,
to the point where you're like, this is a curriculum. I just went through my own masterclass. Like,
yeah.
How long did that journey take?
Oh, that was probably, an easy 5-6 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Nonstop.
Yeah.
I gave up any career. I went and lived a very simple life. Just such a simple life. At one point in time, I was living in a little camper trailer, and I didn't have to. I had all the skills in the resume to go like make the money and do all the things. And I just was more focused on, it wasn't focused on a curriculum. I was more focused on like
The work. Yeah.
And I wasn't that exposed to it. And like I had seen stuff of like do the work and the shadow work, like Jungian, like shadow integration, but I didn't know how to. I could read it. I probably could have read the workbook curriculum. I would have understood nothing of what it was saying. So,
Right.
But there was just something inside of me that was like, just keep on this path. And so I just chose it at all costs and figured out ways to pay enough money to like pay a couple bills that I had. But I really tried to reduce my overhead.
Yeah.
So that I could put 80 to 90% of my time into, what they call the work. And
Yeah.
I was terrible at it, like so terrible at it, and didn't know how to find mentors or anything like that. So I did find mentors. I did find amazing people. And that obviously speeds up the process much, much faster. But yeah, it was like a 5-6 year long journey. Yeah.
A couple of things you mentioned I wanted to dive a little bit deeper on. You mentioned how everything starts with compassion. That's how you release the judgment. For some folks out there, or what I hear sometimes, there's almost like this correlation between self-compassion and what gets confused with apathy or laziness. It's like, if I'm compassionate with self, how can I set goals for incremental improvement or find areas to be better if I'm always just giving myself a pass at everything?
Yeah. I wrestled with that for a long time. A long time. Right. Faith without works is dead. Faith is action. And faith and hope are inseparable. The Greek word for hope is elpis. And so you have to say, well, then what's the opposite of hope? And the opposite of hope is despair. So when you look at when you're in despair, you're essentially in a pit and you cannot see a way out. That's why you lose all hope. But when you have hope, you can see, like, I always think of it as like this hidden rope that's like down into that dark pit. And if you can see a way out, now you have hope. There's a difference between wishing and hoping. Wishing is like, I can't see my way out, but I'm going to get out, right?
Yeah.
Hope is, I can see my way out and I can get out. But it has nothing to do with action. So the word for faith is an action, right? Faith is a verb. And so when I have my hope and I can see my way out, now I get up and I go work and I go do that, which is why faith and hope are, they're partners. Yeah. You can't have one without the other. And yeah, it just, I think I'd just been in so much despair. I think I'd just been in so much, but I started to see ways slowly to get out. And I just wanted to put all the time and energy of like, is that really a rope, right? Or is that like really can I really climb up onto that rock and then over that rock and like do the dino jump across?
Yeah.
Am I willing to do it? And yeah, I guess I was always willing to. I didn't really feel like I had much to lose either. Like, you're at rock bottom. So it's just like, so if I fall, like, great, I'm back at rock bottom.
Great.
Right? And so having all of that, compassion is what allows you, I guess I'll speak for myself. What I learned about compassion is that it gave me more faith. It gave me more courage to act. It gave me more courage to take that leap. And if it fell, I was going to be compassionate with myself. And then I'd go climb it again and fall again and try that route again to get out of this despair. And when I had been in places like that before in a lot less dramatic ways, but I was always mean to myself, like really mean to myself. And that was what was modeled to me as a kid. So of course I was that way looking back on it now. But when I would try things and it didn't work out, I mean, oftentimes I was so scared to try something new because if I wasn't going to be good at it, then I was going to be a failure and I was going to be an absolute asshole to myself. And it was actually just a way to protect myself from being so mean to myself. So,
and I would imagine that would it'd probably prevent you from taking action because you knew what the consequences would be of failing. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And it was in my subconscious too. It wasn't like I was thinking about it in my mind. It just, that's how I was going to be.
Yeah.
And so compassion, like, got rid of all of that. Because it was like, well, if I fail, well, at least I tried. If I failed, I could just go again.
Yeah.
If I fail. And then when you're that way with yourself, well, then I only want to hang out with people who are that way. So now I'm starting to build this little community who are people that are compassionate with themselves and they try things. And so then when I fall, my community is like, dude, I've fallen too. It's okay. Get back up. So I'm telling myself to get back up. And then my buddies are telling me to get back up. And then all of a sudden it's like, it's very healing because like I'm having an experience that directly contradicts my old experiences. So I'm trying, I'm falling and I'm failing and people are pointing and laughing their fingers and those people are my inner circle. And it's like, well, I won't do that again. Right. Yeah. But now I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to be compassionate with myself. So I got this courage now to dust myself off and try. And I'm very trepid and I'm very nervous about it. But then I'm starting to surround myself with people who are compassionate too. And because we align and we're just aligned that way. And I like the way they think and they like the way that I'm thinking. And then I try and I fall and I'm not expecting them to come and help me dust off my knees and clean up my scrapes and bruises and broken bones and all that stuff. And then they are. And now I'm having a completely contradictory experience to what I'd had in the past where, at times I'd perceived that I was being laughed at and pointed at and all that stuff. And now I can clearly see that I'm being dusted off and hugged and supported. And that just gave me even more courage and that just gave me more compassion. And that's a critical part of it. And that's a part I did not see was going to happen.
Yeah.
I just couldn't even foresee it. And some people that I thought were going to be on that journey where I was like, oh, well, this one buddy, he's, and it turned out he didn't meet my expectations. He's on his own journey. But then my buddy over there that I'm like, yeah, I don't really hang out with him. He's cool, but I don't really hang out with him. Turns out he was the compassionate one that stepped in and became the new inner circle. And it's like surprising things appear that you just can't foresee. I guess that's fate too. It's like to be able to still work. And yeah. It's like the loneliest places I've ever been is in a marriage with somebody else. Some of the loneliest places I've ever been, there's people all around me. So loneliness is a perception. Because factually I wasn't alone. And so I started to realize when I had moved out to the mountains and simplified my life, it's like solitude was very different than loneliness. And some of the most connected places and times that I've ever been was in solitude. And I realized that it was what was happening inside of me was what was making the difference. And it was the stories I was telling myself, they were coming from those perceptions. And I ended up making peace with myself in moments of solitude. And I've had moments of solitude that it was shatteringly lonely. And then I've had moments of solitude where it was so fulfilling and so connecting.
Yeah.
And that's part of the journey is, it's like they say in relationships is you can never really truly be with your partner until you can be with yourself. Until you've learned how to be with yourself when you are in solitude, because you have to learn to wrestle with the loneliness and the perceptions of that. And soon, you got two things. You can continue to not like yourself, or you're there alone and you just learn how to be friends with yourself. And when you can be friends with yourself, then you can really start to be friends with everyone else, because I'm not expecting them to fill in any of my gaps, because now I know how to do it myself. And that's a really profound thing to learn. Now, I kind of going back to the peyote and the ayahuasca and all those kinds of things, those will give you a shot of consciousness to be able to understand those concepts and know that you can work through it. But it's not going to take away the need to have to go get that merit badge of learning how to be your friend in solitude. That's just a thing that people have got to experience. I think people got to experience. The more sovereign we become, the better partners we become. And there just has to be seasons of solitude.
Yeah.
And that is going to bring up some deep wrestles with people. And most of us are already in that wrestle. Going back to your point, and the data and the research is showing that most of us maybe have one person. And that one person might not be like a place where you can still be fully vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so that could be really lonely with that. But if you're wrestling with it, you're actually in the school of getting the merit badge right now. You don't want to be in the school, so you're trying to get somewhere else. Right. And that, more Eckhart Tolle talked about the more we resist, the more pain and struggle and wrestle comes up. And so it's like learning how to just willfully surrender to what life has become. And I could never willfully surrender and learn from what life school was providing me and trying to give me the education, because I was too stuck in victim mentality.
Yes. Yeah.
It was like, life is screwing me over and God hates me, and you're like shaking your fist and all that stuff. And those just make for funny stories once you get on the other side of that. You just sit around and talk about all the times you curse God and everything. And then all your buddies that have the merit badge and learned it, and you cry laughing, because you're just like, I did that too. Yeah. So it's like very normal.
You talked about the not needing ayahuasca, DMT, a psychedelic experience in order to do that work.
Yeah.
It could help if you're integrating it appropriately, taking the steps. But I mean, in participating in the rewilding experience this weekend with Mustang Medicine, I mean, I saw firsthand a group of people, a lot of vets, first responders, people that have lived high stress lives or in the throes of high stress situations on day to day. I mean, there was no psychedelic component to what was going on here,
no.
right? And
we're a sober program.
Yeah, and I could see the profound impacts it had on the individuals participating and what the value of the curriculum that you mentioned can provide to someone to give them the tools to create a better inner circle, to really go inward and create better boundaries and be more vulnerable.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the transition point where you said you reached out to people, you felt like you've kind of come full circle and you had the plan to start basically providing healing or the tools to other people to get them to better spots, and kind of the genesis of Mustang Medicine and how that came about?
Yeah, I mean, it came because I felt like I was just, again, in that lonely, ruptured, fractured relationship with myself. And we wanted to find, I just believe that everything is a training wheel, right? Like psychedelics or even books and podcasts. Like, you have everything within you, but I had heard that, but I didn't understand that. And what had happened to me is I ended up developing codependent relationships with, like, one of the things I'm most addicted to is learning.
Yeah.
Because I just know what I don't know. And then every time I learn something new, I get a dopamine hit. And then I'm just like, it's my drug of choice, right? And so I'm just like, I got more books than shoes and clothes that I've ever bought, right? It's just, it's like a full-blown addiction. And that's a great way to also stay up in the head and never get into the body. And, be in the mind and not the heart. And that'll only take you so far. And so I just was like, I just have a fundamental belief that we come to Earth and everything that we need to be able to get through the school is provided for us if we can just slow it all down and realize it's right there and it's my teacher, it's not my torturer. Mm. And so as I was finding ways to do that, and I'd called Jeff and Amy and, a couple other facilitators that are with us. They had learned the same lessons, but just in different ways. So I was like, let's just combine, and you can teach how you learned it from that angle, and I learned it from this angle, and then let's marry it with the science. Yeah. Because one of the things with like retreats is it's always hippie stuff, right? And that was always very difficult for me. I'm just like, I'm not gluing crystals to my forehead. Like, I'm not going to wear tie-dye. Like, I'm not going to go buy some bracelets and with wooden beads on it and some MC Hammer looking pants things. Like, I'm not going to do that. And the part of it is because I had gone to some of those retreats and they actually ended up being really cool and really profound for me, but it was really hard for me to understand because I like being up in the mind. And so I was like, what's the science of what's really going on here?
Yeah.
And so we were able to blend that together and just create an experience that could just simplify and teach people. And we created 3 tenets out of that: authenticity, vulnerability, and accountability. And if you have those 3 tenets, you can repair the relationships that you have with yourself that are ruptured. You can repair the relationship with God that might be ruptured, with family members that might be ruptured. But it has to start with repairing with the self. And that's what authenticity is. It comes from the prefix to the word is auto, which means self. And so it's being in a genuine state of connection to myself. That's what authenticity means. And I always thought if I was going to be really authentic, then I needed to have like more light and less darkness. And then I could be authentically true because I'm the light of the world. And actually, authenticity is just to say, this is my darkness and this is my light, and I have compassion for both of it. And that doesn't create apathy.
Yeah.
That creates the truth. And the truth is I'm like, and this shadow shit is like hurting me, and it doesn't feel good, and it's hurting my friends and my community and my family. And so it actually creates motivation to be like, I'm now compassionate with myself. So these weaknesses are now going to become strengths to me because of the compassion, because of the empathy, because I'm not just going to like lay on the sand and in the grass and like smoke ganja all day long. Just like maybe there's a time for that. It's never been my thing, but I think I think that's like where the hippies are kind of giving it a bad name, is because they just don't want to participate in the matrix, and they don't want to participate in the rat race and the disconnection and, you know, just all that stuff that's going on. And it's good. We shouldn't be, but we should also go work our asses off to go create what we do want, not just sit in a park and just get high. And so to me, apathy comes from like a state of hopelessness.
Yeah.
It's like, we're in a pit here, and it's not working really good, but I don't know how to make an impact and make an influence for it. So I'm just going to lay in the park and snuggle with my crystal and smoke my whatever. And it's like, well, that just kind of feels like compartmentalization, and that feels like, I don't know, it feels lazy. And I think because it probably is. But being able to really do the work and really being able to like see how it all comes together, I have more energy, more focus, and I'm like, we got a lot of work to do. Like we got to get we got to get up and build this life that we want. And that was the thing I didn't understand. You know, I didn't understand it would energize me, and it would, and the amount of work that it could be done is really inspiring. It's really impressive.
Yeah.
And I think we all want to leave a good legacy behind too. So
yeah,
it feels like even more motivation that gets added to it. And the facilitators all feel the same way. And they're really high accomplished individuals and incredible people on their own. And
can you talk about the, because, you know, staying in the day-to-day life and the reality of the world as opposed to disconnecting, which I think sometimes gets associated with the hippie view of some of this stuff. Is like, right, you just mentioned, I'm just going to take my crystal, go and lay in the grass and, you know, smoke dope or whatever. But, you know, what we talked a lot about today or during the retreat this weekend was about how the tools you need to actually go off and confront the difficult situations in the moment in a very practical way. And, you know, you talked about the different facilitators. Can you just briefly talk through the different modalities that Mustang Medicine teaches, the different facilitators leading those things, and basically how those tools or modalities of training, so to speak, help people become more authentic, more vulnerable, more accountable?
Yeah, I would say what we've done is we've married science with experience, right? So it's not just a bunch of science where you're intellectualizing everything. It's taking the science to be able to describe what the experience is. And in the experiences are the modalities. So, for example, cold plunging. And cold plunging has become really popular. Wim Hof has like really brought that to the Americas and popularized it. But a lot of people are doing it and not really understanding the benefits or what are actually happening in like mitochondrial biogenesis, right? And it's like a big scientific word, right? But it's like, but what is mitochondria, right? And that's the energy that's in the cell. And so if you want more energy, you know, you can put the energy drink down and you can actually go repair and start creating this biogenesis of new mitochondria that's in our body. And studies have now shown that the cold plunging is one of the most effective ways to be able to do that. We have classes on nutrition and gut health in the gut-brain axis, where all of us are just this chemical soup that's walking around. So you get kind of the big ones like endorphins, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, insulin, cortisol, right? When those are out of balance in the soup of our human bodies, it's going to fuck some shit up, right? Yeah. It's like going to make a mess, and it's not going to taste very good. And so being able to understand like what the foods are that I'm eating and what the damages that they're doing to the neurotransmitters and all the sugar that's in our diet right now. But then also having the experience where we provide really amazing, good tasting food that you could like go home and be like, oh, I can easily produce this and make this myself, and it tastes amazing. Sweat lodges, and you could do a sauna in your own gym, but the science of the sauna, we and I won't go into all of it, but one of the things, the data points that I love about the sauna is that there's a 50% reduction in all-cause mortality when you go and sweat for 60 minutes a couple times a week. And that's something that anyone can do in their local gym, that has that. And so we have access to all the tools and all the modalities that are out there, but a lot of us don't understand why it's so important. And so we're taking these modalities, providing the positive experience, and then supporting it with the science so that you can go, oh, that's why I need to have my morning routine. And that's why I need to, and understanding feelings, right, which are sensations in the body, understanding emotions and the message that they're trying to give us. They're all positive. Fear has a positive message, anger, sadness, disgust, right? They all have positive messages for us. They're all trying to take us back to that realization, that understanding of wholeness and how to best take care of ourselves. But when we don't understand that, for me, for a long time, I felt so tortured by those emotions. And so it's like, what are the feelings and the sensations that I'm having in my body? What are my emotions that are now associated with that? And the message that they're saying, what am I perceiving from that? What is the story I'm telling because of that? And what's the core belief that's being activated inside of me? That's a lot of self-awareness that's going on, but that's happening right now where you're listening to this podcast or you're doing the interview on the podcast, right? It's like, that's emotions and feelings and everything are happening all the time. We should be experts in this. And 6-7 years ago, somebody asked me the question, what's the difference between feelings and emotions? And I was like, I don't even know what they are, let alone the difference between them. Yeah. And so we're blending like what you actually are and helping you have the knowledge of what you actually are, your neurochemicals and community and how community all functions, which is authentic. Like really healthy, secure community has to function with authenticity. If you're going to be really authentic of where you're at, right, then you have to have compassion because you're going to say some shit. It's going to be not comfortable to do that. And your community has to do that. But everyone has to be honoring authenticity. But the only way to be authentic is to be vulnerable. Yeah. Right. And then why am I vulnerable? Well, because if my shadow parts and if the parts of me that are not, vulnerability means to be wounded. So like, I'm going to be authentic to where I'm at and the bullshit that I got going on. And now I got to be vulnerable about that, which now I'm open to being wounded and hurt. And then I've got to be accountable to it. Right. And accountability has nothing to do with blame. Like that's a thing a big tenet that we teach here is like, when I say, so who's accountable for this? It's like, what does that actually mean? And what that generally means is like, who's at fault? Yeah. But when I'm blaming somebody, what I'm looking for is to figure out who's at fault. And accountability is the conceptual opposite of blaming. So if I'm going to be accountable, I cannot be blaming myself and I cannot be blaming somebody else. I just have to, and now I can be authentic. So it's like this circle where each authenticity and vulnerability and accountability all feed into each other. And it has to be founded on compassion. And so we like go into the etymology of words and how like words matter and what they really mean and how it builds security so that the truth can come out, right? So the safety that it can actually come out. And yeah, there's a lot of modalities and a lot of things that are actually so simple, but we're taking the science, we're taking the experience, and then we're providing the experience within a particular modality, whether that's sweat lodge or cold plunging or breath work, or even a classroom setting or the meals that we eat, right? It's like everything is a part of the experience. The lay down, ceremony that we have with the Mustang, and we're just trying to blend all of that in like this really simple way that people get to have the experience in their body, understand it in their mind, and do it in a community setting where they're like, oh my gosh, you're just as fucked up as I am. And also you're trying to do the same things I actually secretly am and I don't know how to do. So should we join this together? And the facilitators hold that all together and set the example and, become the pillars to the experience. Yeah, I think it's actually a really rare thing that we've done.
Yeah. And for those listening where our conversation might be resonating with them a bunch and they might be interested in learning a little bit more, where can they find out more about the retreats and information that you guys post on either social media or on your website?
Yeah, website is mustangmedicine.com. That's somebody an executive at a really massive company that we all would know their name if I said it. She was an executive and she came to here and she said, your Mustangs were like medicine to my soul. And I was like, it's a good name. So mustangmedicine.com is where you can go see all of our events. We have half-day events. We've got multi-day events. We've got online virtual events. There's a lot of cool things that are there. And then we post everything on our social media, which is also Mustang Medicine and all the different channels and platforms.
Awesome. Well, I'll include the link to the website and all the social accounts in the show notes. So if anyone's interested in diving a little bit further, definitely check those out. Hugh, I really appreciate our time. Before we wrap things up, though, I do have this closing tradition that I want to do a rapid fire round of questions if you're ready for it.
Okay.
So favorite book and why?
Favorite book and why? Oh my gosh. My addiction is books. How do I choose one? Favorite book? I'll give you the one that popped right off the top of my head is the New Testament. And there's a particular version, the red letter version, meaning only the words of Jesus, New Testament. I just really love reading his words. There is such a profound message. Everything we've been talking about is in those words. So he's been a mentor of mine, and I think he embodied the Christ. Christ isn't Jesus's last name. It's a way of being. It's a way of living, and he lived it so well that we associate that as his last name. But I just draw inspiration. It's the first word that came to me.
If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be and why?
William Wilberforce. Yeah. William Wilberforce was he was an abolitionist in the late 1700s. Abraham Lincoln said, every schoolboy and schoolgirl in America should know the name of William Wilberforce. And in the late 1700s, which is the time of the American Revolution that's happening over here, he died in 1833, and they called him the George Washington of humanity. So what Washington had done for liberty and created this country of America, they believe that William Wilberforce had done something just as equally as impactful in a positive, virtuous way for all of humanity. And they referred to him as the Washington of humanity. He was essentially a trust fund baby who, in his teenage years, he became best friends with William Pitt, who later became the Prime Minister of England. And so he's got all this money, and he's into politics, right? And he's in Parliament. And you have to understand the the environment of England at that time, 1 in 4 women were prostitutes in London. 1 in 4 is 25%. The average age was 16 years old. It's a very fragmented, vicious society. And simultaneously, you have the transatlantic slave trade that's going on. And William Wilberforce was exposed to the realities of what the slave trade actually was. Because if you're in England, you're just eating your sugar, and you don't understand what's going on. And he spent his fortune, he spent his entire life. It took him 44 years to get a bill passed. And the bill that was passed was to make it illegal to have products that were coming from the slave trade. And they attribute the entire abolitionist movement over there, which later set the example for Abraham Lincoln here in America, which is why Abraham Lincoln was saying everyone should know the name of William Wilberforce, which he wouldn't show up for decades later. But there's a book written by Eric Metaxas, one of my favorite authors, and the book is called Amazing Grace. William Wilberforce, one of his mentors, was the author of the hymn Amazing Grace. And the book just ties in all these really amazing things that his life does, right? And yeah, they made a movie after the same title called Amazing Grace. So if you don't want to read the book, you can go watch the movie Amazing Grace. It's about the life of William Wilberforce. And, he's one of the most, he said that the way that you could change a vicious society is through virtue, and that virtue was the answer. And I mean, he got the king on board with them. I mean, he got all the social influencers on board. This guy was like the first social media marketer out there. And it took him 44 years to change culture. And I just have been inspired by him since I found out about him, which was in 2004. And he's just a hero of mine.
Very cool. Very cool. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Gosh, best piece of advice. I think the best piece of advice that took me the best piece of advice that I've ever received, and it has taken me decades to understand, came from my mom. And I remember her saying it, gosh, I was probably 14 or 15. And she said, son, you can be right or you can be happy. Sometimes you can't be both. And you're just going to have to make your choice of what do you want. And I don't know, that just always stuck with me. And over the years, I would always be right. And sometimes I wasn't very happy. My mom would be like, you can be right. Or I'd hear her words, pop in and be like, you can be right or you can be happy. And I think that's been a really hard principle for me to integrate into my life. I love it, especially in my earlier years. I just loved being right. To me, being right was safe. If I was right and if I could prove that I was right, well, then I would give this wonderful PowerPoint presentation. Everyone would get on board and we'd all be on the same page. And then we're all happy. Yeah. And it's that doesn't work that way. And
as long as everyone accepts my rightness, then we're all happy. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's.
What word best describes you?
Oh, what word best describes me? I'd say the Greek word teleos. It gets best translated as wholeness or complete. It's the word that was written in the original Greek New Testament in the Sermon on the Mount. It's Matthew chapter 5, verse 48. In English, it says, be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. The word perfect is the Greek word teleos. So when it gets translated into modern English instead of the English of the 1600s, when the King James Version came out of the Bible, perfect back then meant whole, complete, having integrity, right? But today it means more like flawless. And So I often read that verse of be therefore flawless, even as God is flawless. And that's impossible for the human to be flawless. And when I went and read it in Greek, it's essentially I think it's best translated as own your wholeness, realizing you're complete, lacking no parts. And that word that describes that essence is teleos. And teleos comes from the root word telos, T-E-L-O-S, and that means to aim. It's like to have your aim. So it's really hard to understand you're complete and you're whole until you can be really clear on the aim that you have. And I
basically accept the imperfections, the good and the bad, as one yourself.
Yeah. It's Carl Jung's process of individuation. It's integrating the shadow and the shine. It's realizing that because of the shadow and the shine, that is what I am, right? I am all of it. And I think the word that would best describe that is the Greek word teleos for me. And I've often thought about getting that tattooed on me as well. So
nice. Last one. What's a quote you live by?
One of the quotes I live by is slow down faster and you'll get there sooner. I tend to want to rush off, tend to want to get there, and I miss steps and I take shortcuts when I'm going too fast. And it's a thing that really, that's a principle in horsemanship. And when you got these wild horses that are just ping-ponging off the walls and they're just so terrified, you can't gentle them, you can't teach them because they're too dysregulated. They're being driven by all their emotions that they don't understand. And it's really easy to get frustrated at them, which was a mirror to me of how easy it was for me to get frustrated at myself when things weren't coming together. And I had some of the best wild horse trainers that I was able to mentor under for a number of years. And they both had their own way of saying the same thing of slow down faster and you'll get there sooner. And it just caused me to kind of put the brakes on. And it's a paradox too. I think all truth is hidden in paradoxes. Yeah.
That's a great analogy. I know I really love that portion of the weekend where you talked through the taming a wild Mustang and the lay down and paralleling it to the nervous system and what's going on in the human body as well. And I mean, that's just one tidbit of, what happened this weekend is really, being able to do all these experiences, cold plunging, sauna, things that I've integrated in my own personal health protocols, but to then learn more about the physiological side of what's actually going on, how we could use it to be more centered to better regulate our nervous system. Was really cool. And then you mentioned it earlier, a couple of years ago, you didn't know the difference between feelings and emotions. I'm certainly just getting awoken to this idea as someone who's put on a lot of armor in their life and not been used to feeling sensations in the body and tying emotions to that. I found everything that we covered this weekend super valuable, fun to be a part of. And it's just been an absolute pleasure to getting to know you a couple months back, you and Amy, and learning more about the work you all do. And I certainly appreciate the opportunity to continue to be a part of that.
Yeah, well, I'm really appreciative to be even invited on your podcast. I mean, I have much respect for you. I think you're doing amazing things. And so it's a joy to have you here with us and excited for the friendship to continue on.
Hell yeah, man. I am too.
Hey, hopefully you enjoyed the show with Hugh. I know I certainly enjoyed my conversation with him and the time I had with Mustang Medicine down in Utah. Wanted to provide some closing thoughts and some takeaways from that weekend. And I guess I'll start with breath work. I didn't take Hugh through a breathwork session like I did with Jordan. The intent of the show is that the guests I bring on, I will lead them through a breathwork session, have them provide their experiences and takeaways from that session. But since I was participating in the retreat, I thought for this one, I'll go ahead and just record myself and provide my thoughts. And I will say doing it in a group setting provided definitely a different experience. I think most of the time when I'm practicing breath work, I'm doing it individually. And so Amy, Hugh's partner, is the one that led us through breath work, and she did an amazing job of talking through, the physiological benefits. And so some things that they mentioned were, 80% of toxins that we encounter are filtered through the lungs. And most people are not breathing the proper way, which is deep belly breaths, diaphragmatic breathing. A lot of us have developed shallow breath, and that a lot of that is contributed by the stress that we encounter in our day-to-day life. It tends to tighten and restrict us and not allow us to get into our full breath. So one benefit of that is getting down and deeper into the lungs and helping with the filtering and clearing out of those toxins, the residual toxins that might be residing at the bottom or base of our lungs. Our endocrine system is constantly pumping different hormones into our body, cortisol, adrenaline, depending on if we have a fight or flight reaction, or, if you're experiencing anger at certain points during the day, or maybe stress from looming deadlines. All those hormones live in your body, and you begin to have physical manifestations of how those things kind of reside in your system. And some people might be familiar with the body keeps the score, kind of talks about utilizing breath work and some somatic practices to kind of restore balance and healing to the body. And certainly having a breath work practice can kind of help restore a sense of calmness, help clear out your system from those different hormones and things that we hold, the stress that we hold in our body. And, they talked about an analogy, right? That, we're the only animal that doesn't do kind of this body dump after a fight or flight response. And so they showed a video of a polar bear who was having a fight or flight response and was kind of shaking its system, letting everything get out of the body. That's not something that we do as humans, right? We have some sort of reaction to some stimulus that happens, and then we go about, returning to our daily life. And so I thought that was a really good explanation of the benefits of breath work from a practical standpoint. There's also some really good material I have for additional education on the benefits of breath work. If you check out the link to tenablevibrations.com in the show notes on the education section, there's several books I have listed out that kind of talk about the benefits of proper breathing and its effects on athletic performance and a variety of topics. So check that out in the show notes. Another thing that was really cool was Hugh taking us through the equine therapy session. This was something that I was very unfamiliar with. And so for those that aren't aware, I guess horses have a very similar nervous system to humans. And so Hugh had this wild Mustang out that was kind of bucking and going a little crazy. And he, during his class, kind of just worked to tame this horse, or Mustang, and he was talking through kind of its own fight and flight response, how horses cope with stress, and talking about, basically getting him comfortable and get to a more vulnerable state. And once he was able to kind of tame the horse and kind of get him into a restful position, he then asked us to then think about a message that we would want to give the horse. And everyone kind of went up and, got to caress or hug the horse and give its message to the horse to help kind of calm and ease it. And at the end, what Hugh had said is, whatever you had shared with the horse is subconsciously the message that you actually need for yourself. And I thought that was pretty cool and insightful. And it was also cool to see that how the horse was so resistant and protective, but once it did get into a vulnerable state, it was then able to receive such love. And I thought that was really cool. The last thing I wanted to touch on was the conversation around ayahuasca. And by no means do I want to have the show seem as if it's advocating for that type of experience. There's certainly some legality issues with that and medical history that you should pursue or discuss with, medical professionals if that's something that you want to do or further research on. But what really stood out to me was, despite that being a very impactful experience that Hugh had, it really lost its impact due to the lack of integration. And I do want to reiterate something about Mustang Medicine. Obviously, they're a sober retreat, so there's no psychedelic component to what's going on, which is really cool. There's no legal barriers to doing these practices. And there's certainly, at least when it comes to breathing, not much medical concern there. I don't think anyone's ever died from breathing. Certainly people have died from not breathing. And so there's just a low barrier to entry. For breath work, all you need is, a yoga mat, maybe, and then your breath and you. And so it's really cool that you could have deep, profound experiences going inward. And what's cool with Mustang Medicine is they really did have great integration tools and tips for, taking the things that we discussed at the retreat to practically reintegrate and bring back to your job, society, back home. And that's a really special component that I know is important to Hugh, given some of his experience prior to, forming Mustang Medicine with the team that he currently works with. The point around the ayahuasca experience, though, does kind of tie into where we're going in our next episode. So we'll spend some time with a classmate of mine from West Point, someone I went to Ranger School with, my buddy Will Webb. He was also a Green Beret towards the end of his time in the Army. He is now getting his master's in psychology and is working to become a therapist. He is also doing work with veterans and other individuals on integrating different psychedelic experiences such as ayahuasca and the work that can go on post those types of retreats to help really make sure the work and experience around it is super impactful. And so I'm really excited for our conversation with Will and to dive a little bit deeper into something that we briefly discussed on today's show. But go ahead, leave some comments in wherever you're consuming your content, whether it's YouTube or Apple Podcasts. Let us know what you liked about today's show. Let us know if there's something you want to hear more of. And until next time, have a good one.